Ryan Whittaker owned three things that seemed unshakable: a fortune built with cold precision, a chain of luxury shopping malls across the east coast of the US, and the certainty that no one ever truly saw him. At 38, Ryan was the billionaire. Behind Whittaker Plaza, a luxury mall in the suburbs of Portland. He liked to think he'd built more than a place to shop, a haven for families, memories, and connection, or at least that's what the commercials claimed, but the reports landing on his desk in recent months told a different story. Constant complaints, slipping sales, employees quitting en masse, polite emails, overly optimistic managers. Total disconnect. He'd heard this kind of story before, when he lost his father to pride and corporate blindness. And he had sworn he'd never make the same mistake. So on that overcast Friday in September, Ryan made a decision that would change his life forever. He was going undercover in one of his own stores. Dressed in faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and a backward baseball cap, Ryan was unrecognizable. Unshaven, wearing worn-out sneakers, he parked in the mall's underground garage and walked to the employee entrance of Western Willow, a mid-range department store and one of his favorites, and handed in a fake resume. He went by Jay. He was hired as a temporary stockroom helper. No one suspected a thing. To them, he was just another guy trying to make ends meet, and it was on his second day on the job that he met Sophie Bennett. Sophie was a walking disaster. Clumsy, overly chatty, when nervous, constantly dropping things. At that exact moment, she was stumbling over a rack of dresses and letting out a loud, "Oh no, not again." Ryan, Jay, hurried to help her pick up the hangers scattered on the floor. "You okay?" he asked, crouching beside her. Sophie laughed, at herself, face flushed. "Just my pride. Again. I honestly don't know how they still let me work here." She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of exhaustion and hope, that Ryan couldn't ignore. "Maybe because you light up this place more than you realize," he said before thinking. She paused, looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt something different, a reason to stay. Slowly, something began to grow between them. During breaks, she'd share half her muffin with him. Behind the scenes, she'd laugh at his silly jokes he told just to see her smile. And when she spoke about her dream of opening a vintage boutique, something inside him cracked, in the best way. Sophie lived with her sick mother, worked double shifts, and filled old notebooks with window display sketches she might never realize. She was everything Ryan wasn't, real. But the improvised fairy tale began to unravel when the store's manager, a gruff man named Travis, started taking his frustrations out on Sophie. Ryan, hiding behind his fake badge, swallowed his anger day after day, until one Saturday evening, he saw Travis yelling at Sophie in front of customers after she dropped a stack of boxes near the fitting rooms. "If you can't even handle this, maybe you're better off working the parking lot." Sophie tried to hold back tears. Ryan couldn't. "Hey, don't talk to her like that," he snapped, forgetting his disguise for a second. Travis smirked. "And who are you, rookie? Her boyfriend?" Ryan bit his tongue. Sophie looked down. The air turned heavy. "I just think everyone deserves respect," Ryan muttered, returning to the pile of boxes. Sophie said nothing, but that day her eyes held a different kind of light when she looked at him. The connection turned to affection. The affection turned to something more, and that something more inevitably became a confession. One chilly night, sitting on the mall's rooftop after closing time, Sophie shared stories of the father who walked out. The shame of never having gone to college, the fear of dreaming too big. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm just an extra in everyone else's story," she said. Ryan wanted to tell her who he really was. He wanted to say she was now the main character in his story, but he didn't. Instead, he held her hand and said, "You were born to be the lead, Sophie." The following week, he arrived early at the mall with flowers hidden in his backpack and a nervous heart. But Sophie didn't show up. Not that day. Not the next. On the third morning, he learned the truth. Travis had fired her, no warning, no reason. She had been 10 minutes late after taking her mother to a doctor's appointment. Ryan was consumed by quiet rage. He marched to the management office. showed his real credentials, and within 30 minutes, Travis was no longer manager of anything. But when Ryan rushed to Sophie's apartment to explain, she greeted him with eyes full of heartbreak. "You lied to me?" she asked, seeing the luxury car, the tailored blazer, the truth written all over him. "Sophie, I needed to see what was really happening. I never meant to fall for the clumsy sales girl," she interrupted, voice trembling. Ryan tried to explain, promised nothing between them had been fake, that his feelings were real, but Sophie shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You live in an entirely different world, Ryan, and I can barely afford mine. We're not from the same reality." Then she said the one line he would never forget. "You saw me and you still lied." They walked away with broken hearts. But can true love survive worlds apart? Comment below. Do you believe honesty matters? More than status? Sophie Bennett's apartment felt even smaller that morning. Her eyes were swollen. Her mother, seated in the worn armchair, noticed. "He came to see you, didn't he?" Sophie nodded silently. She could still see Ryan's face, or rather Mr. Whittaker's, standing at her door with flowers in his hands and regret in his eyes. She wanted to believe him. But how do you trust someone who lied from the very first? Hello, Ryan Whittaker spent the entire week locked inside his office on the top floor of Whittaker Plaza. The city kept moving, but inside him, everything had stopped. The store, the mall, the business. All of it felt small compared to the emptiness Sophie had left behind. His assistant noticed. The directors noticed. But no one dared ask. Until his mother called. "Ryan, I heard you personally fired a store manager and then disappeared from the company. What's going on?" "I just saw something that needed fixing," he replied. But he knew the truth. It wasn't just the manager. It was how he'd lived until that moment. Distant, guarded, and for the first time he'd wanted to truly connect. And he'd failed. Meanwhile, Sophie struggled to find a new job. Bills piled up, the fridge grew emptier, and her heart felt heavier. "Maybe I judged him too quickly," she admitted to her mother one evening. "Or maybe," her mum replied, gently, "you just need time to figure out what you really want." That night, Sophie opened her old sketchbook. She saw her window display drawings, her boutique plans, and there, in the corner of a page, was a little sketch of a man in a baseball cap holding a flower. She hadn't meant to draw him, but it was him. 2 weeks later, Sophie received an envelope slid under her door. No return address, just her name in handwritten script. Inside, a simple card. "I know I don't deserve your time, but you deserve the world." The window display at West and Willow was inspired by your drawings. Go see it, even if just for a moment. R. Sophie hesitated, but the next day she went. As she arrived at the mall, her knees trembled. Everything looked the same, but something in the window had changed. Porcelain dolls, soft lights, antique mirror frames, a vintage bicycle in the center, surrounded by floral dresses. It was her world, brought to life. Beside the display, a small plaque read, "Concept inspired by the sketches of Sophie B." She held back tears. People stopped to admire, took pictures. But she only saw the brushstrokes she knew so well. Details that came from the heart. From the second floor, Ryan watched. He didn't approach. He didn't want to pressure her. He just wanted her to know she was seen, that she mattered. Sophie looked around. For a moment, their eyes met. He waved. She hesitated, then turned and walked away. A week later, Ryan went to the park where she used to eat lunch. She wasn't there. 2 weeks, and the art studio where she took night classes was closed for renovations. 3 weeks, and he received a message, not from her, but from Travis, the former store manager. "That girl from the window display? She's working at a little shop across town. Heard it from a former co-worker." Ryan went there. It was a modest thrift store called the Thrift Muse, and there she was, arranging mannequins with a tired smile. But something about Sophie was different now. She was blooming. Without him. He walked in, pretended to shop for a vintage flannel shirt. She spotted him. Her smile wavered. "Following me now?" she asked, half joking, half defensive. "No, I just wanted to see you doing well," he replied sincerely. "And you are." "I'm trying." But it still hurts, she admitted. Knowing you saw my life and hid yours. I know, and I accept that maybe I'll never undo that. I just wanted to tell you, you changed me, for the better. Silence. She looked into his eyes. Thank you for the window display. Thank you for inspiring it. And then she said what he feared most. Now it's my turn to find myself, on my own, Ryan. He left the store without pressing further. On the sidewalk, he took a deep breath. For the first time, the magnate who controlled everything accepted not being in control of love. Sometimes loving someone means knowing when to step back. But is this story really over? Comment. Have you ever had to let go of someone, even while still loving them? The following months passed like a grey season. Sophie Bennett kept her routine at the small second-hand shop where she'd been taken in by a kind owner, Mrs. Adler. The place had soul, walls covered in vintage frames, old record music playing low, a scent of worn wood mixed with chamomile tea. It was there that Sophie slowly found pieces of herself again, but even with her heart occupied by new challenges, she couldn't forget Ryan Whitaker's eyes. As for Ryan, he buried himself in work. He expanded the mall, rewrote contracts, renovated common areas, but the spaces felt even emptier. Like the place he had built no longer belonged to him. You look exhausted, his mother said over Sunday lunch. I'm fine, he lied. Ryan, do you still think about her? Every day. That's when destiny made its move. The marketing team at the mall was organizing the local Creators Festival, an event to showcase independent small business owners with temporary booths inside Whitaker Plaza. The idea had come from Ryan, without thinking of Sophie, but it was the events director who brought up her name while reading the approved list. There's a shop called the Thrift Muse, lots of character, great visuals. The owner is Sophie Bennett. Ryan froze. She's participating in the festival? He asked, trying to sound casual. Yes, already confirmed. Why? He just shook his head. Nothing. I just liked the name. 2 Saturdays later, there she was, wearing a soft blue dress. With embroidered flowers, her booth looked like a portal to another time. Polaroid cameras, rare books, retro pieces, and framed quotes that read, "Be your own chance." Sometimes a no turns into a yes. I saw her, and I saw everything I was missing. Ryan watched from a distance. His soul seemed to smile even though his body remained still. Then she saw him. Sophie swallowed hard. For a moment she considered turning away, but something told her to stay. He walked up slowly. "Hi," he said. With the same calm voice she remembered. "What are you doing here?" she asked, half smiling, half nervous. "This is my mall, but it's never looked better than it does now." She smiled shyly. "You talk like time hasn't passed." "It has, and it changed me." They talked for a few minutes, no rush, no masks. Sophie shared her plans to open her own creative studio. Ryan told her about the renovations he made to highlight small businesses. And gradually, the pain between them made room for the truth that had always been there. But before either of them could get too lost in the moment, Sophie said, "Ryan, just because the pain has faded doesn't mean the fear hasn't stayed." He nodded. "I know I'm not here to erase anything. I'm here to build something with you. If someday you want to." She didn't reply. But deep inside, something began to crumble, maybe a wall. In the days that followed, Ryan would visit her booth discreetly. Sometimes he bought a small item. Sometimes he just stood quietly nearby. Sophie didn't stop him, but she didn't invite him either. It was a silent dance between what they felt and what they weren't ready to say, until at the end of the festival, Ryan found an envelope on his office desk. It was from her. No words, just a handwritten note. "You've seen me from the beginning. Now I want to really see you. Meet me at the rooftop where it all began. Today, 7 p.m. Could the love that stayed silent finally find its voice? Do you believe in true second chances?" The mall's rooftop patio was quiet at sunset, as if the world below belonged to another reality. Sophie arrived at 6:45 p.m. She sat on the old wooden bench that still creaked in the same corner. The same spot where months ago she had laughed and cried with a man she thought was just another stockroom co-worker. At exactly 7 p.m. he arrived. Ryan Whitaker walked slowly. No suit, no disguise, just himself. Real. Vulnerable. "You came," he said. "I didn't know if I would, but here I am." The silence between them felt more comfortable than before, but there was still something that needed to be said. "I'm not expecting anything," Ryan began. "I just wanted to listen. If you have anything left to say." Sophie took a deep breath. "I loved you, even without knowing who you were. And that confused me, because when I found out the truth, I didn't know if what I felt had been real, too. And now," he asked. She looked toward the horizon. "Now I know. I loved the man behind the disguise, but that doesn't erase how much it hurt to be lied to." Ryan nodded. "You're absolutely right. I was just lost, and you were the only person who made me want to be better without saying a single word." They sat in silence for a while. Then Sophie asked, "Why did you choose that specific store to go undercover in?" Ryan gave a sad smile. "Because it had the worst customer service reviews. I wanted to see what was really going wrong. But instead, I found you, and everything became a lot harder to control." She smiled softly in return. "Funny, you hid to find the truth, and I opened up, only to find a lie." Night slowly fell. City lights began flickering in the distance. Sophie stood up. "I don't know what the future holds, Ryan, but for now I need to keep walking my path alone." "I understand," he said, rising with her. She hugged him. It was a calm hug, full of memories. And a quiet goodbye. The next morning, Ryan didn't go to work. He drove for hours until he reached the coast, sat in the cold sand and thought about everything. His absent father, the business that had pulled him away from himself, the woman who'd made him feel like it wasn't too late to start again. From his coat pocket, he pulled out the note she had left him. "You've seen me from the beginning. Now I want to really see you." He stared at the ocean and whispered, "I want to see myself too." In the following weeks, Ryan announced a bold new initiative at the mall, a Roots Space program, a project offering temporary retail spaces to small local creators. Rent-free for 6 months, it was his way of giving back, and secretly his way of keeping Sophie's heart alive within that place. 1 month later, Ryan received an email. Subject: Co-creation proposal sender, Sophie Bennett, The Thrift Muse. "I'd like to propose a collaborative window display for one of the new Roots space shops. It doesn't have to be romantic, just art. But if you'd like to talk so we could share a cup of tea after the meeting." Ryan read the email 3 times. Then he smiled and replied, "I accept the co-creation and the tea. But be warned, some romance might slip into the process. Even when everything seems finished, love finds a way to be reborn. Have you ever seen something come back to life after it was broken?" The designated space for the pilot of the Roots Space program was on the ground floor of Whitaker Plaza, right next to the food court. It was visible, busy, risky, perfect for something new. Sophie arrived carrying 2 tote bags, hair tied. Up and eyes determined, Ryan was already there, holding a notepad and wearing a smile that tried to hide his nerves, not very successfully. "Ready to create?" he asked. "Since before you tricked me," she replied with a raised brow and playful tone. They both laughed. The tension melted. Over the next several days, they worked side by side designing the new display window. It was a fusion of their styles. Sophie's softness, Ryan's sophistication. She wanted to reflect soul. He wanted to inspire transformation. Together, they found balance. One afternoon, Sophie commented, "It's funny how different you are now. Or maybe you're just finally seeing who I've always been. Or maybe I'm finally ready to see," she replied, looking at him with warmth. The window was completed in 2 weeks. The result was a portal into another world, floating picture frames with messages of renewal, restored retro furniture, mannequins, wearing outfits that told silent stories. At the center, a table holding anonymous notes from visitors, all handwritten, "I still believe in fresh starts. Sometimes no becomes a yes. I saw her, and saw everything I was missing. Sophie glanced at Ryan. He didn't need to say a word. She knew the last note was his. On the day of the launch, the line to see the space wrapped. Around the corridor, influencers showed up. Local news covered the event. People got emotional, and Sophie bloomed. At the end of the event, just as evening began to fall, Ryan approached her with 2 cups of tea. "Mission accomplished," he said. "So, now what?" she asked. "Now you decide if you want to keep building something with me or without me." Sophie was quiet for a few seconds. Then she replied, "I've seen you in 1,000 versions, Ryan, but none was as beautiful as the one I see today." He smiled, a quiet smile full of soul. "So that means, it means I believe in second chances, even ours." 1 year later, the Root Space program had expanded to 6 more malls. Sophie had become the lead curator for the initiative across the state. She kept her own shop, now with 2 branches, and oversaw seasonal art displays. And Ryan? He had finally learned that he didn't need to hide in order to be loved. He just needed to be seen by someone who looked with their heart. One ordinary Saturday, as they sat sipping coffee on the terrace of Sophie's new creative studio, she said, "Remember the first time I tripped in the store?" "I do. You knocked everything over, including my defenses. And you helped me pick everything up, including my broken pieces." They laughed, and in that laughter was everything that can't be bought: truth, respect, and love. She was just a clumsy store clerk, he, a hidden CEO. But when love is real, even opposites find alignment. Do you believe love can transform who we are? If this story touched your heart, share it. And never doubt the power of an honest new beginning.